On this week's episode of the Father Dynasty Podcast, Tyler joins me to talk traveling without kids, how we value CMC and JT, and dynasty disappointments. So, without further ado, what is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of the Father Dynasty Podcast. I'm your fatherly host, Chu, here in the manhole, here to talk fatherhood, fantasy football, and everything in between. And with me today is a very special guest. He is getting ready for a Euro trip, and I'm waiting for him to ask, do you want to see my itinerary? Check him out on Twitter at tdaily11. Tyler, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. This lighting's doing wonders for me. I'm actually really sunburnt because it was a corporate golf outing like we talked about in our text messages earlier today. So, it was a gloomy 58 and cloudy this morning when I left the house. And of course, by the end of the day, it was 82, sun's out. I'm kind of burnt to a crisp over here, but other than that, we're doing all right.
Love it. How was the golf game? I know you were saying this wasn't the first time getting out this year, but not playing as much as you used to. So how are you hitting it? What was your best ball strength?
It was the first time getting out this year. So it's actually It was actually the first time I've played golf since this event last year. And it's always the first Monday in October. And I was due to play some golf in Florida with my dad while we were on vacation, but had some unexpected health issues crop up that kind of got in the way of that. So, but I digress. I was actually very satisfied with how I played today. It's kind of, I'm trying to look for a decent analogy, but can't come up with one. So I'll just say it was very satisfying, but like, it didn't make me want to get back out there and play golf all the time either. Like I tell everybody in this stage of life, like we all know everybody works so much, with Megan and I both working, Emma being in a daycare or a school, we just don't see each other that much during the week. So the value prop of me being away from my wife and kids for 6 hours and spending, at least $60 to $70 on the round. Plus if I want to get some beers or get some lunch or something like that, it's just not there for me at this phase in life. But events like these, it was really cool, sponsored by our, my paid portion was sponsored by my company. So I'm very fortunate that I didn't have to pay out of pocket, throw down a little bit of money for some raffle tickets, and which I did not win anything. 4 years running, I have not won anything, but next year it's on me. But the golf game was pretty solid. It was to be expected, lost a handful of balls, but I think I contributed several tee shots, and I think I wasn't just along for the ride. I actually had some balls that were worth playing in the scrambles. So
I've learned, if anything, getting out there for that first round of the year or first round in a while, and you kind of get in a groove, and then that becomes the point where it's like, I'm going to play more, but you don't play enough to like really fine tune the swing. So then it's like, you're in your head of like, all right, what did I do that first round? And then that's usually where my golf team just collapses. And I'm like, all right, back in the garage, keep the clubs in there. See you next year. Well, as you mentioned, kind of talking about family and kids and everything. So you're getting ready for this European vacation, and how important is it for you to take trips without the kids? I mean, it doesn't have to be a big European one. Could be just a quick little weekend or something like that. But how important is that at this stage, once you're having a kid?
Yeah, I think this might be the first big case study in that. We've done maybe a night or two away from Emma since she's been born, but I don't really think, I'm trying to rack my brain really quick. We did do, you couldn't call it a vacation necessarily, especially for Megan because she was working. We got some time away during the college football playoff last year, going to the Rose Bowl in the national championship game, but and actually Megan put me to work too, so it really wasn't much of a vacation, so to speak. So this is really our first case study with that. But we were talking with some friends last night, and it was just it's coming at a good time because and other parents out there know it. You can get if you let yourself, you can get into a little bit of a rut, and I don't mean that to sound like super negative or anything, but it's just your days kind of become like Groundhog Days. It's just you're getting up, you're doing the same routine, you're coffee, get Emma a glass of milk, get her a breakfast bar, put her in the truck, take her to school. You go to work, do your thing, come home, cook dinner, and it's just over and over and over. So, fortunately, we're going to be able to get away for this trip. I've got tremendous in-laws. Megan's parents are amazing. My parents as well. They stepped up and watched Emma when we were in Columbia the other weekend for the Mississippi State football game. But they're going to take Emma. My in-laws are going to take Emma this week. So just really looking forward to getting kind of that reset. And, once you have kids, you just get so far removed from that just one-on-one dynamic a lot of times where, you might get your date night here and there, but it's easy to lose sight of, the original pairing, the original team, as Jacob, another frequent guest on the show, likes to talk about, with Team Ridgeway. There is like you forget that you guys were the original team members, so it'll be a good calibration for us, I think.
Yeah, I think for the longest time, like Marley and I didn't do even like we tried to do a date night, like like once a month, like a set aside type thing. Just she and I, and then we in the last like couple of months added the thing of like literally every single week, like we get to like leave for dinner or whatever, which we have thankfully at this point, our current house, our neighbor, his daughter, who I think she's a junior in high school. Yeah, junior this year. It's basically just watching the house. Like Finn's asleep, or ideally should be asleep. So it's really just not needing to do anything, but more so if he needs like go to the bathroom or whatever, like let him out and do that. But yeah,
make him sound like a dog.
Essentially,
he's got to go to the bathroom. Just let him out.
And then right back in the crate. There you go.
Yeah.
And so he's the fourth dog, and but doing that, when we can, certainly ideally a long weekend, if not just traditional, like maybe like for the Saturday, like I think it was about a month ago. Marley and I went up to her parents' house, and they live near I think it's called Jiffy Lube Live or Jiffy Lube Center or whatever is the name of like the concert venue in Bristow. But not too far from their house. So like it was my brother-in-law watched Finn and then put him to sleep and everything. Well, we went and saw, it was a couple different people. It was, oh, you're gonna love this. We went and saw Nickelback.
Heck yeah. Great start.
So that was Nickelback, and then it was Brantley Gilbert. And then don't remember the third one. It was another kind of country rock type guy. But it was a good time. A lot of Nickelback fans. So I know for all the shit and flack that they catch for them being, I guess, meme worthy and just a perpetual joke, there's still a lot of tickets, so they're doing okay. But,
yeah, I think they might have sold out their show here in Charlotte when they were here a few weeks back too. So nice. Some Chad Kroger fans.
I will say Kroger, he puts on a pretty exciting show. The banter he has, like just kind of, there's a lot of those guys where it's like literally at the end of the song, it'll just be conversations like with like a bandmate or just talking to people. Like it's pretty amusing the entire time. It's pretty funny, but he definitely, I think he is aware of kind of the general joke of the band, but then I think he also understands like, must be a pretty good joke if I was able to get this many people to come here and pay to be there. So he gets it. But all right, well, so let's on the heels of week 4, as we're recording, watching the Giants Seahawks game, let's jump into the FF perspective. So the FF perspective, kind of recapping this past week's NFL happenings. And like I said, this is being recorded during the Giants and Seahawks game, but still plenty of football that has already been played. And a couple of ones of note, we touched a little bit on this on the last episode, talking about those winless teams and with how the matchups were, which I think was pretty incredible. It was 4 teams, the only 4 teams without wins, all playing one another. So a nice losers incest type of situation there. So at this point, it was now the winless teams are the Panthers, keep pounding, and the Bears, who squandered quite a lead. Justin Fields still had a tremendous day for fantasy. So what were your thoughts if there was maybe like a takeaway from either one of these games? We now still have, 2 winless teams, and despite the Vikings winning and the Broncos winning, I don't know if there's, the the thought that they're not going to make the playoffs or anything like that. So what would be like a takeaway or something that you're seeing from those games?
Well, the first thing that jumps to mind is it's really interesting that the two teams that are currently remain winless were involved in the biggest, pre-draft trade. So, you've got those two franchises, for better or worse, kind of tied together in that sense, and now tied together in an even in a terrible sense, in that right now, especially from the Panthers' perspective, is they gave the Bears a premium right now, what looks like just a totally premium pick, and can't always review these things in hindsight. You probably shouldn't, or you'll drive yourself crazy. But then I start to think about it as like, all right, well, did the organization feel that strongly about Bryce Young versus Caleb Williams? Because, if you thought maybe you were going to have this bad of a roster, who would you rather have in that situation? I think a lot of people would probably pick Caleb Williams. But as far as the other two teams that came out of there with wins, I would say, I definitely still feel, and I think a lot of people probably feel the same, pretty optimistic about the Vikings' chance of building this thing back. I know that a ton of things last season broke their way. I mean, there were articles and statistics just out the wazoo about how they had just all these lucky breaks go their way. I mean, we saw none so more famous than the crazy comeback and victory in Buffalo that involved, a fumble recovery off of a snap on the 1 yard line that turned into a touchdown, and one of the most insane contested catches that Justin Jefferson made, I think, on a fourth down there in that game. So a lot of things went right their way last year. I think we're just seeing kind of the natural pendulum swing the other direction, but there's a ton of talent on that team. And, we talked about in our group chat, Kirk Cousins. I didn't check after this week's results, but going into last week was, the number one total yardage passer in the league. He still does Kirk Cousins things, that just sometimes he can't get out of his own way. But a lot of that, I think, that isn't necessarily just tied to him. I mean, they've had subpar offensive line play. Alexander Mattison hasn't really been able to get going. So, but just a ton of talent on that team with the emergence of Jordan Addison as well. TJ Hawkinson trading for him last year. So those are kind of be my downloads from those two games. What about you?
Yeah, it has been tremendously disappointing to see how it's been for Bryce Young, and it makes it a bit worse. Again, it's 4 losses, so it's not like when Andy Dalton stepped in last week, week 3, when I guess Bryce Young had injured his ankle, that Dalton got a win, but Young couldn't. But I think it's pretty fair to say Dalton handled the offense pretty well. And that is also to say that Dalton is, I would argue, one of the best backups or better backups in the NFL. And, he was a starter for many years in Cincinnati. I know that didn't amount to much by way of playoff success, but at least in terms of the regular season, I mean, the man is very familiar with running an offense, and certainly being a veteran of as many years as he is. So I think there's an expectation that he would be a steadier hand, and he could, operate an NFL offense maybe more efficiently or easily than Bryce Young could. But I don't know if we've seen like enough wow moments or enough of those things where it's like, Bryce Young isn't there yet, but I can kind of feel like he's getting there. And I know it doesn't help. He doesn't have great weapons. The O-line was supposed to be better. And going into last season, into this season, but I know Corbett, had been towards ACL the last game, been a number of other injuries across the offensive line. So plenty of problems and plenty of hurdles put in his way already to believe that he can, turn this around if surrounded by a better cast and crew. But, I think the rumblings, I think Anthony Richardson, for the sake of fantasy football, clear cut, he's the first quarterback, and I'm glad to see him balling out the way he is. But then the argument was, is it Bryce Young or is it CJ Stroud? I think CJ Stroud is doing pretty damn well in Houston, and I know we've got plenty of season left to play, but if it continues at this trend, certainly at least from a statistical standpoint of the numbers he's putting up in Houston, I think he's going to have a bit of the edge there. And jumping over the Broncos and Bears, Fields finally gets back on the map. I mean, he has a 300-plus yard passing game, 4 touchdowns, one interception. Not much by way of rushing, so not a traditional Justin Fields good game. But back for fantasy's sake, at least for now. I still think this, if anything, is a tremendous opportunity to sell in Dynasty for anyone that you can still sell and believe that this is what he's going to keep doing, and not that he was playing against one of the NFL's worst defenses, confusingly so. I don't know how they're that bad. And then I thought a pretty big bright spot in this one, I think Jake will appreciate this one, as I think he might have been banging the drum for this guy previously. Jaleel McLaughlin, and he's the undrafted, I think it's out of Youngstown State, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
He transferred there, finished up college there. Undrafted running back. He had Javonte Williams coming back from his knee injury and got hurt again in the game, which obviously opened up to Samaje Perine and McLaughlin to come in and take a couple snaps, and he actually ended up leading the team in rushing. Not a lot, but I think he averaged a little over 10 yards a carry on getting 72 rushing yards, so not a bad start at all. But I think these four teams are, Vikings likely heading in a better direction than the other three. But, if the Bears and Panthers stay on this trajectory, the Bears are about to have top two picks. And like we talked about last week with Fields, love to see where that takes them and what they end up doing with that. So jumping over to talking about Christian McCaffrey, so a former Panther, he is still on an absolute tear. So despite Raheem Mostert doing his best to look like CMC in 2 of those weeks there, Christian McCaffrey atop the fantasy running backs, he had 53 fantasy points in week 4 here, 177 scrimmage yards, 4 total touchdowns. Is Christian McCaffrey still the RB1 in Dynasty? I know in Dynasty we consider age and that sort of thing, but CMC's not too old, and he's the do-it-all back on a tremendous offense. So what are your thoughts there?
I think so. I mean, I would be willing to hear some arguments for maybe Bijan Robinson, that maybe he might be the only one that I'd be willing to entertain an argument elsewhere for, because the thing I think with CMC, and not only is it just his individual ability, but you now have to consider that he's in the best offensive environment, obviously, of his career, and he's with one of the more creative coaches in the NFL. And I think there's room as he continues to get older. And obviously right now we're barring some sort of injury, we shouldn't even worry about his age at this point. He's showing no signs of slowing down, obviously. But as that potential comes, should he stay in San Francisco, there's nobody I trust more than Kyle Shanahan to create some sort of role where he's being used in a non-traditional sense, where, you start to see him move into like the Danny Woodhead type usage where, he's getting very select carries and more geared towards passing. As of right now, that's not necessary, but where I might have, like you referenced, I might have more concerns taking a running back at his age so high up in let's say we're doing a startup draft. Like, I think I pretty much would have no hesitation taking Christian McCaffrey still as my RB1. And I was lamenting to you before the show when I saw that we were going to talk about him, that I actually did pivot off of CMC a couple of years ago while he was still a Panther, because I just didn't like his usage rate meets the offensive environment. And maybe that's a good lesson, for me and for other people as they listen out there, is like, believe in the talent, believe in the player, and, believe what you've seen, because situations can change and do so quite often, especially in an NFL today where trades like this just seem to happen a little bit more frequently than they did when we were younger.
Yeah, I think, when his trade happened and the team was going down the gutter, in that season, I was saying Matt Rule's not going to make it till Thanksgiving. I don't even think he made it to Halloween. But after that, or kind of amidst that, it was the then Robbie Anderson, now Robbie Chosen, or whatever his name is now, getting traded, and then CMC obviously getting traded as well, the more notable trade there. I think it's pretty shocking to see, a superstar getting traded midseason, let alone a running back, arguably one of the best running backs in the league from a total skill set standpoint. Also had a pretty tremendous contract tied to him. And not only all of that, but that he ends up going to one of the best situations for him to produce. Like, everything worked out in a way where it's like, all right, if CMC ends up getting traded somehow, I don't think that many people were thinking like, oh, no brainer. The 49ers, who, I mean, it can be Elijah Mitchell, it can be Raheem Mostert, it can be Matt Breida. They'll take whoever. They're going to spend the capital they did to get a guy like CMC. And, it obviously has worked out well, I'm sure it's easy enough for Shanahan to use less draft capital and less cheaper contracts to get running backs. He'd be a fool to say he wouldn't want CMC. And I think he's showing that with his creativity and with tremendous talent in that backfield, then he can get premium production. And that, of course, makes it tremendously easier for a guy like Brock Purdy and those other weapons there to produce, as they also have a top-tier defense. So as a whole, I mean, it's a pretty well-oiled machine in San Fran. So they were my beginning of the season, they were my Super Bowl winner that I was guessing, but I also guessed that they were going to beat the Bengals, and I don't quite think the Bengals are going to make it there, but we'll see how that pans out. So jumping over to news note number 3. So finally, possibly, Jonathan Taylor is going to be primed for a comeback to the Colts and coming off the injured reserve. Now, I guess we don't definitively know that he would be coming back, as there were rumors that as he was about to be removed from the injured reserve, I guess the trade talks were starting to rekindle with a couple of teams being the Rams, the Bills, the Packers, as teams of note. What do you think happens here? I mean, do you think I assume he gets off the IR and, does he suck it up and play for the Colts and then figure it out after? Does he try to force a trade as much as he can? It seems to be that the Colts don't really give a crap if he's going to try and force it. They're just going to keep doing what they're doing and try to mold Anthony Richardson as best they possibly can. But what are your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just wish casting here, but I just I think, there's just zero leverage for him, unfortunately, in this situation. It's just kind of the nature of where he's at on his rookie deal. And unfortunately, this bad blood, I don't necessarily, it's hard to get inside the mind of the player and figure out where his thoughts and feelings are. But I just think that the best way for Jonathan Taylor to either just move on from this or move on from the Colts is probably to get back on the field and play well, more than likely, with this offense. Because, for me as a competitor, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to compare myself to Jonathan Taylor, because I think my athletic shortcomings fall just a little bit off the mark from his. But I'd have a hard time watching the Colts and seeing that potential now that we see with Anthony Richardson out there. And just sitting by idly and watching that go on. I mean, the AFC South is wide open. I mean, the division's there for the taking. The Titans have struggled, even though they look good this week. Obviously the Texans, nobody was really expecting them to do much. They look like a little bit ahead of schedule with how well CJ Stroud has been playing, but Jacksonville's certainly had their ups and downs, specifically as pertains to how Trevor Lawrence has performed. So, if you have the chance to go out and compete for a division and do so with an exciting, dynamic rookie quarterback like Anthony Richardson, I'm probably wish casting, just wanting to see a talented player get on the field. But I do ultimately think that that's probably the best way for him to, if he truly does still want to get out of Indianapolis, is to get back on the field and play well and showcase his talent to some other teams in the NFL.
Yeah, it has been interesting to see what has happened with that backfield since going into the season. At the beginning, I think in the preseason, technically, it was Zach Moss breaking his forearm, and then you're reduced to Deion Jackson. It was initially Kenyon Drake, and then I think he got released. The rookie Evan Hull, who looked okay in preseason, he's on the IR. Deion Jackson ended up getting released. Zach Moss comes back from a broken forearm in what seems like unbelievably record time, and is the starter for week 2 and week 3, averages 27 touches per game over both of those weeks, and finishes as a top 10 running back in each of those weeks. So, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, and of course that, I think we've talked about this before, amidst Anthony Richardson, of course, getting injured a multitude of different ways. Of course, missing week 3 it was with the concussion, but came back in week 4 with a vengeance. So I think when it comes to Jonathan Taylor getting a chance to see what Anthony Richardson can do in the offense, with those weapons that are already there. I have to believe that he would want to be a part of that. That can only boost his value again in the open market to show what he can do. Because I would like to think that, while we talk about sometimes the rushing quarterback can take away opportunities from the, running back, whether it be a bell cow guy or not. I also happen to think that, that should open up enough lanes for Jonathan Taylor to where he might get a couple touchdowns vultured here or there, maybe. But, Jonathan Taylor's a pretty explosive all around back in his own right. So I'd have to think that he could, still produce at a pretty tremendous clip. And of course, someone's going to pay for that. Maybe not what he wants them to, but something better than what he's possibly been offered by Indy. And just as a nice little exercise, just curious, would you in Dynasty, would you rather have Jonathan Taylor, or if you could assume this is going to happen this way, a late 24 first? Late being like, in our league is a 10 team, so say it's like the 8, 9, or 10.
It's a really good question. Man, I think for me at this point, that's basically a coin flip. I mean, We're talking about a guy that probably a year to a year and a half ago, I would have been willing to entertain Jonathan Taylor as the potential RB1 in Dynasty. So, you're talking about we talk about the elevated offensive environment, with the way Steichen is running that offense, really kind of moving the Philly principles over there. You have to be excited about this wheels up on the ground game. And really, I mean, their pass rate over expectation is, I think, in the top third of the league as well. So I think I would probably lean a little bit more towards taking Jonathan Taylor than the late round pick, but it's certainly closer now. It's just, I hate uncertainty. So it's really hard for me it would be hard for me to pull the trigger if I was trading the pick for Jonathan Taylor. But I think if I was acquiring Jonathan Taylor for the pick, oddly, I would feel better about that, I think.
Yeah. Because I mean, just thinking about, like we were just talking about CMC, like, I can only imagine where Jonathan Taylor would go if he actually got traded somewhere, and if it actually would be in season, or if he finishes out this year and then goes somewhere else. But I think he's gotten a chance to kind of see how things have shaken out. A couple of those other backs, like the Josh Jacobs and the Saquon Barkleys, have just taken their 1-year deals and stuff. So, I don't know exactly what happened on that RB call, that preseason call, where they were talking about how they're going to handle contracts or how they're going to deal with free agency and that sort of thing. But I don't think that, it's serving him at all if he's sitting out or not on the field, if healthy, to get himself a better deal, at least next year. So
yeah, it's just, when have we seen that work out? And I think the one that we always now think back to is Le'Veon Bell. And, I know that Jonathan Taylor's a lot younger than him, but it just, time away from football is usually not good. Usually doesn't do anybody. It's not a good value add. So,
a value add these players we're going to talk about here are not. So these are actually going to be the biggest dynasty disappointments thus far. And we are, of course, only just about a quarter away through the 2023 season, but it is, of any of the professional leagues, it is pretty incredible when you think about, if the NFL season is, each team gets 17 games, every single game matters that much. And certainly in fantasy, that versus basketball versus baseball. So being almost a quarter of the way through the season, just plucking a couple of guys, rookies, veterans, otherwise, that have maybe disappointed based on expectations, injury, performance, that sort of thing. So who would be someone who's disappointed for you thus far?
Top pick for me has got to be Joe Burrow. And I know it's, he's dealing with the calf issue, but after watching, you tend to obviously watch more of teams that you have fantasy players on. And, while I don't have him in our dynasty league, I do have him in a redraft league, and I've watched a decent amount of the Bengals this year. And it seems a little bit more so than maybe just the calf thing. I know that Joe Burrow's gotten off to some slow starts in seasons past as well, but to only have one double-digit output in the first 4 weeks, and even at that, it was a 16-point game against in a kind of a sloppy win on last week's Monday Night Football game against the Rams, where they're just not able to get stretch teams vertically right now. And when you think Joe Burrow and you think about that offense, and now unfortunately they're going to be without T. Higgins for at least a few weeks, it looks like. But when you think of that offense, you think of big time explosive vertical plays in the passing game, and it's just been totally devoid of that. And I think really the big red flag for me now was, obviously being a Titans fan, I'm fairly in tune with what's going on with that team, and there in recent memory has not been a bigger pass funnel in the NFL than this year's Tennessee Titans. It was like they helped Deshaun Watson get right the week before. It was like the Titans are extremely solid up front, stopping the run. Like we saw with the Chargers the week before, it was like Austin Eckler goes down, everyone scrambles to go pick up what's his name? I'm blanking on
Joshua Kelly.
Yeah, everyone goes to pick up Kelly. Thank you. And he just falls flat on his face. And the Titans can stop the run exceptionally well with that front four and beyond. And they're back. The back end of their defense is not there. So it's like I was totally expecting a big get right spot for Joe Burrow this week, and it was just more of the same. It was really discouraging. So hopefully it's just a little bit of the injury, a little bit of rust, but I don't know. Zach Taylor has also had just kind of a little bit of a weird regime in Cincy where there's just been very inconsistent results. Their great has obviously been really great when they do things like get to the Super Bowl and multiple AFC championship games, but I don't know. Their lows have also been really low. So I'm just hoping that this is just the dark before the dawn.
Yeah. And just looking at how, I think anyone that has watched any bit of Bengals football has definitely seen, Burrow does not look like himself. I know certainly in, I guess it was week 3, just seeing how he was playing, it was very obvious that, the game plan was he's not okay, but what can we possibly do to let him last that throughout this entire game and hopefully score some points. And just looking at his fantasy performances thus far, so at least on a per game basis, he is a shade behind Derek Carr in terms of points per game. So he's got, I think it's 8.4, and Carr has 8.7. And both of those guys are shockingly behind Bryce Young at 10.1. So just looking at guys that have actually played a couple of games. Yeah. So, I'll leave out Aiden O'Connell, who is also in front of all those guys, but only one game, so a part of one game. But just thinking about the weapons at his disposal, at Burrow's disposal, like you said, Higgins is, of course, now down for hopefully not too long, I think, with rib injury. So Jamar Chase sounded a little bit heated after the game, talking about being open. So there's no doubt that the weapons are in fact there. Of course, Joe Mixon in the backfield and that sort of thing, but and the ever incredible Irv Smith at tight end. So I hope they can turn it back around. I know there's the difficulties of when you start with that many losses that first quarter of the season. Statistically speaking, it's tremendously difficult to climb back. And I know they don't play in the easiest division necessarily from a opposing defensive standpoint, but hopefully they can turn it around. Hopefully Burrow will not have a lost season, but if he does, I would have to think that next year he will, in fact, look like his old self and hopefully back and healthy. So who do I talk about? Well, there's one person I'm going to talk about who absolutely crushed my soul, and that would be Antonio Gibson. I did not expect him by any means to be the lead back in Washington, but I did expect him to do a bit better than running back 56 through week 4 and 4.1 points per game. Yes, this is PPR because he actually was a wide receiver in college, but that's not really being utilized at this point. So the big thought was, as we've joked, I think a number of times on the podcast about Riverboat Ron Rivera mentioning when he went over to Washington from Carolina, hey, this Antonio Gibson guy really reminds me of another running back I knew in Carolina, Christian McCaffrey. I think you know him. And while that volume-wise and, how well he was able to do for fantasy in his first 2 seasons, I believe, that, didn't ring fully true, but he was producing pretty damn well. And Brian Robinson comes in as a rookie, recovers very quickly from a gunshot injury to his leg and steps in. And, it was a bit of a back and forth between Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson last year. This season, it has been the Brian Robinson show. And, of course, under center, Sam Howell has been, I think, pretty tremendous in running that offense outside of his poor showing in week 3. But overall, I think he's done pretty well. But Brian Robinson has even actually taken some of the receiving work from Gibson. I think a lot of people thought, and myself included, I thought Gibson was going to be taking the J.D. McKissick role or the Jerick McKinnon role, as you have Eric Bieniemy coming from Kansas City over to Washington to be the OC. You would expect, it would at least be, on par with what Gibson has done, if not an improvement of his targets per game. And again, him being a receiver in college, him being able to utilize that skill set as being a big, explosive guy and a pretty good pass catcher. And he is more so on par with a little more of what he's always done. Now averaging just about 3 targets a game, not much of anything in the on the ground for rushes. And I don't know what to say. I mean, I can hope it turns around a little bit, but Brad Robinson has looked pretty tremendous. And I don't know if Antonio Gibson really has a place in that offense that is as notable as J.D. McKissick or the Jerick McKinnon of last season in Kansas City. So what are your thoughts on Antonio?
Yeah, and they've trailed in several of their games, and even with him maybe getting some more snap share because of that, it hasn't been parlayed into usage. So it does kind of unfortunately feel like the beginning of the end, at least in Washington for him. Sometimes with guys like him, I do believe in his talent. I think like you do, but it just feels like if he wasn't going to get used this year without that other pass catching back like you're referencing on the roster, then where's it going to come from? So I echo a lot of your sentiments, and that it's been pretty disappointing for him, and don't see a lot of paths out now to where he is successful there.
Well, speaking of any more disappointments, who else has you down in the dynasty dumps?
I think as of right now, and I was actually looking before, I'll say the name Alexander Mattison. And, I say that he is fresh off of, back-to-back double-digit weeks. But I think some of the things that the naysayers were saying out there are kind of becoming true, and in that, he hasn't necessarily been the most efficient back in his usage. And, in the weeks that he did have to step up and quite often fill in for an oft injured Dalvin Cook, he always got really high usage. And it typically, because of the traditional success that we've seen from the Vikings offense as of late, put him in good scoring positions and oftentimes resulted in RB1 finishes. So, we have not seen that, but we also haven't really seen the Minnesota offense as a whole be firing on all cylinders. And I know that sounds strange when we talk about Kirk Cousins leading the league in passing to this point, but it's just a lot of it, I think, has been garbage time when they've been trailing, and they haven't been able to really get the offensive line performing well. I think Christian Darrisaw, their shout out Virginia Tech, their very talented left tackle, has been out. I think this was his first week back this week. They're missing another key piece. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but hopefully they can get right and he can bounce back. But I do think, obviously it doesn't bode super well. They go out and acquire Cam Akers, who is also a very talented player. We didn't see him eat away a ton of snaps from Alexander Mattison this week, but I think that will continue to grow as the season goes on and on. So far been a disappointment. Although I do think he still has the capability of bouncing back, where maybe I don't feel as optimistic as someone like Antonio Gibson.
Yeah. Starting out those first 2 weeks, I know were tremendously disappointing, although, the guys behind him, the Ken Nwangwu, the Todd Chandler, no one was really, I felt like, pushing him in the sense of, you felt like Mattison was losing the job to someone who was outperforming him. It was, Mattison was getting the volume. Other guys were getting some opportunities, but everyone was just not doing tremendously well. And, that kind of started in week 3, whether it be, the Cam Akers, the deal was done by then, but he, of course, did not play in that game. And then week 4 was his first game playing. Who knows if that lit a fire up under his butt or what. And of course, as the Vikings are put in more of a position to not have to be so pass heavy and can maybe run the clock a bit more, we could see that change. Obviously, it's not by any means that Kirk Cousins is not good at that. It's not like they don't have Justin Jefferson, not like they don't have, the KJ Osborne and the Jordan Addison, who, against the Panthers, Jordan Addison, absolute goose egg, no targets, no anything. And they're able to pull out the win. I think that's pretty incredible. You don't want it to be that way, but I think being able to kind of create more of a balanced offense, I think will certainly serve them well throughout the rest of the season. And it's not as often you go up against a winless 0-3 Panthers to put them to a further winless 0-4 Panthers. But like we were saying, amongst those, at least those 4 teams, I think there's a little more optimism with that team as a whole in the Vikings. So hopefully that continues to be a trend, and Mattison and Akers form a at least semi-formidable committee backfield there. So I hate to go running back again, but I have to pick another one that ripped my heart out. So you will be very familiar with this one, as I was thinking he was going to become something, and he certainly wasn't. I owned this entire backfield in Dynasty at one point, and Rashaad Penny is one of those guys who really, really disappointed this year. And I still don't fully understand it. So going into the season, it was a bit of a musical chairs with, getting that running back room set and going. The only mainstays there were the confusingly high-volumed Kenny Gainwell and the giant killer Boston Scott. Those guys stayed there. You had Miles Sanders going over to Carolina, getting a pretty strong deal. Then the Eagles go ahead and trade, I think, a pretty affordable deal to get DeAndre Swift from the Lions, and then they go ahead and spend even less than what Boston Scott was being paid, if I'm correct, on Rashaad Penny, which is crazy. And they're really showing what they think of that contract, I guess, because this man just is not playing. And, I think when we saw DeAndre Swift step in week 2 after Kenny Gainwell got injured, and the concern was, oh man, Kenny Gainwell got so many snaps in week 1. Are we really going to just watch the Eagles give Kenny Gainwell the ball, and lead this committee in a 1A, 1B situation? Sure enough, DeAndre Swift has a career game in week 2, and I think it's pretty firmly his backfield with Kenny Gainwell to spell him. And the only game that to this point Penny has even played in is that week 2 game for DeAndre Swift's career game. And the only reason that Penny got to play was because, of course, Gainwell was out. Penny needed to be active. And the only reason he actually came in was because DeAndre Swift was getting so tired from running so far, they let Penny come in and get a couple of snaps. Otherwise, he has, at times been the healthy scratch or just not been playing. And, for someone who was once he was a first rounder. He was at the 32nd pick for the Seahawks. He was a late first rounder, but a first rounder nonetheless. He's battled injuries his entire career, and it's never really fallen into place. So it would be pretty wild to think that, he lands in this place where, like we talked about with Christian McCaffrey landing in San Fran, great offensive mind, great offensive line, overall just a great situation. I mean, DeAndre Swift is certainly thriving behind one of the league's best offensive lines. And for Rashaad Penny not to get the chance to even attempt to thrive in that backfield is tough to see, but it's also tough to argue with, what they've done thus far in Philly. I mean, they're showing they don't need him necessarily, and who knows, would be tremendous to have him as a healthy back going into the back half of the season as you get into those cold weather games when you're really needing to pound the ball. And that could be the thought. I'm just trying to be optimistic, as I am still a Penny owner. So what are your thoughts on Penny?
No, I think where you ended up there was actually where I was going to kind of give my optimistic take. Cause I think right now, obviously Howie Roseman, the general manager for the Eagles, just does a tremendous job. I mean, it seems to invest in all the right positions and just put together a really, really strong backfield for almost no money. I mean, when you talk about all the players that you just mentioned with Kenny Gainwell, Rashaad Penny, and DeAndre Swift, and just, I mean, you're talking about one of the better backfields in the NFL in terms of just depth, top to bottom, and skill. Like any single one of those guys, on with the exception of Penny, obviously with the Eagles, but we've seen him pop off with the Seahawks. We've seen Kenny Gainwell now pop off with the Eagles, and we've seen DeAndre Swift do it as well. So we know we've seen these three running backs all do it. So it kind of reminds me of the Patriots back in their dynasty heyday when they would have, just LeGarrette Blount and then James White and freaking, what was that guy, Bolden, Brandon Bolden or whatever. It was just like whoever was in the best health and shape at that point of the season, whether it was September, December, the playoffs, they were just going to carve out the right roles and everything for them. So like, I don't think Penny, like, obviously you can't be super optimistic for him right now in fantasy, and he's totally unusable, but it would not surprise me if one of these guys, gets nicked up and all of a sudden he's very usable later on in the season, whether it's, because of like you said, the cold weather or something like that, or it's just sometimes it seems like they're just going to be willing to ride the hot hand. So I don't think he's totally dead, but obviously super disappointing. Hopefully you don't have too much of him elsewhere, besides it in Dynasty.
All right, you talked me off the ledge. I'll hold on to Penny, hold on to Gainwell because I have to at this point, and hope for the best. But I won't let you go too further down in the dumps. Only one more each of a dynasty disappointment for the both of us. So who's one more, your finale, you would say, for your dynasty disappointment?
Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and we're watching the Seahawks and Giants right now on Monday night as we record. So we'll see. No, okay. I just want to make sure because somebody just caught a touchdown pass. I want to make sure it wasn't him, but it was DK Metcalf. So because that would have been really.
This guy's a scrub and touchdown.
Yeah, but I think I don't know if it's the worst average depth of target, but it's up there. I mean, his ADOT is like 2 yards right now, so they're just not using him in a super effective way right now. And he's we talked about this I think on last week's episode where we've gotten a little bit spoiled I think by some of these rookie wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and the like, where these guys are just popping off at rates that we have not seen or have been used to in most of our football watching life. So I don't want to start taking some of this for granted, and we may see him flourish a little bit more down the road, but it's certainly been disappointing thus far. And I think maybe we underrated a little bit how easy it was, or how easy we thought it was going to be for him to come in and earn some targets when, listen, I mean, DK Metcalf is who he is. Great wide receiver. And then Tyler Lockett just kind of right now seems like a little bit of an ageless wonder. I mean, he's still doing incredible things. I think he's 30 or 31 now at this point, and still being very effective in his role. So it may take some time. I'm not obviously totally pivoting off Jaxon Smith-Njigba or anything like that, but certainly disappointing given, who we thought was the clear wide receiver one out of this class. And instead he's just getting smoked by Puka Nacua.
Yeah, I think, when we do consider that, like the Justin Jeffersons and those guys that I think have tainted our view of what rookie wide receivers are supposed to do. Seeing JSN, honestly, even on his own team, I mean, his snap share has steadily, crept down over the first couple weeks here. And as we talk about, hampering our expectations for rookie wide receivers, I mean, we've got the undrafted rookie out of UCLA, Jake Bobo, on the Seahawks, who approached, I think it was a little bit under the snap share of what JSN got in last week, so week 3. Obviously, week 4 is still going on, so we'll see how that shakes out. But so that's concerning, I would say, to say the least. But I think before the season, everyone was so hyped on JSN. When we saw him to go to Seattle, And of course, they also got Zach Charbonnet. So good to see Seattle investing really in offensive weapons. But everyone was trying to figure, are we picking a side? Or are we just saying it's Kenneth Walker's going to run the backfield and it's DK and Lockett and these other two rookies? They have to take a seat and, learn from these guys ahead of them. Could be the case. I think that JSN more than Zach Charbonnet would really be, would be taking a seat behind those guys. And I've seen Charbonnet get a little more involved week over week. But JSN, I think he's someone who, if you're able to buy him, I guess, somewhat low at this point in Dynasty, I think it would be worthwhile considering, if he still doesn't do too much between now and the end of the season. I would like to think that still with, name recognition and value in that, you could still cut bait and not lose a tremendous amount there. He's still, of course, a first-round wide receiver, but so many people give up on them after that first year if they're not hitting certain marks, certain metrics. So hoping that JSN will get a little more involved there in Seattle. So the finale, and it's funny to say finale when we're talking about people who have disappointed us. So my guy here is Rashod Bateman. So another receiver who has been riddled with injuries. Certainly that's how he has not played one entire complete season to this point. He is averaging 4.3 points per game. I think going into this season, you felt confident because he was healthy. Lamar Jackson just got paid. It was a bit concerning when you see Odell Beckham get signed for a pretty big chunk of change, I think, for what people thought he was going to be getting. And Zay Flowers, of course, getting drafted by the Ravens. So hoping to see that Rashod Bateman was going to carve out a better share there. He has actually, got a steady bit of snaps, but now he, of course, missed week 4 with a hamstring injury. And ironically, with his snap share going up, his production in fantasy has almost equivalently gone down from 6.5 points to 1.6 points, latter of which was in week 3. So, and with those guys in front of him, I mean, in week 3, OBJ was out. And I think the thought would have been that would have been the chance for Rashod Bateman to step up. You, of course, still have Mark Andrews there. J.K. Dobbins is, he's out with his injury. And overall, you're really just, the usage has been steadily going to Zay Flowers. Mark Andrews is always that safe target there. So I don't know what we're going to get from Rashod Bateman at this point. I mean, honestly, even Nelson Aguilar, the man who is tremendously hated in Philly, he's popping up and producing here and there for Lamar Jackson. So at this point, Rashod Bateman sincerely needs to just be healthy for a long enough stretch to do something. And at this point in his career, you absolutely can't give up on him for fantasy, but his value is so much lower than what it was when he entered the league. And at this point, you're probably just stuck holding him. You could drop him, but I think you're going to be kicking yourself if in like a year or 2 years he does well, but it's tough to have a roster spot if the league is shallow enough on a guy who has just not been able to stay healthy.
Yeah, I think if it doesn't get better, like you said, you're just going to get caught holding the bag at this point because there's really not a whole lot you're going to be able to get for him, and he's actually been out targeted by Nelson Aguilar so far this year, so that's really discouraging. I know Rashod Bateman's had his litany of injuries, and you never know what a guy might be playing through, but if he's not able to get it done this year, and especially when all offseason we heard, how we're going to air it out under Todd Monken, with the Ravens. And right now you've got Zay Flowers basically almost, with the exception of Mark Andrews, you can basically almost total up the rest of the wide receiver targets, and they're barely beating out Zay Flowers. So he's really the principal target owner right now in that offense. And like you said, it's really just on Rashod Bateman to go out and earn at this point. And I'm scared 4 weeks into the season for him, but I don't think, unfortunately, you're going to be able to get much for him. So you're just going to have to hold on and hope it gets better.
Hold on and hope it gets better. I think that's probably the best takeaway from all these dynasty disappointments. Tyler, I appreciate you coming on, and of course we'll give you a Father Dynasty farewell, as of course you and your lovely wife head off to Europe and go explore over there. But any last words there? A quote, a cheers, a send off to yourself, if you will.
Yeah, I'll send me off to Europe and cheers my wife. We've been planning this trip for a super long time, and I'm just very appreciative also of her initiative. She's a planner both professionally and also personally, and there were some things that obviously she consulted with me obviously all along the way, but in a way I kind of feel like some of this trip is going to be a really cool surprise for me because she's just been taking on so much of the planning aspect of it. So very appreciative of that and just looking forward to it and can't wait to, debrief in a couple weeks. We'll be gone for almost 2 weeks. So really looking forward to catching up later on this month. And, I'll be a certainly more cultured and worldly person when I get back.
Absolutely. And, again, I know you still have not shown me your itinerary, but you can save that for, for off live, if you will. So,
yeah,
Tyler, appreciate you coming on and enjoy that European trip.
Thanks, buddy.